It is time for another Hero Spotlight review. Today, we are going to be focusing on Psylocke. Hello and welcome to Nelson All Over Cards. My name is Nelson and today we're going to be taking a deep dive look into one of the newest heroes of Marvel Champions, Psylocke. We're going to be talking about her kit. We're going to talk about some of the basic cards she likes along with the cost curve. We're going to be breaking down aspects in terms of what she's least good in to best good in, rank her in the overall ranking of all of our Marvel Champions heroes. And one quick caveat before we dive in. Most of this video is going to be about solo play. Now at the end, we're going to have a section where I talk a little bit about our multiplayer thoughts. And if you are curious about any of those sections of the videos, I'm going to have timestamps so you can jump around to any specific point that you want to see or come back to. But let's just dive right into it. Psylocke's alter ego is Betsy Braddock, who has a 3 recovery and 10 HP. She has a 6 hand size, so pretty standard across the board there, but she does have a special setup ability that says to put her 2 Psy upgrades energies into play, knife side face up. What are the Psy knives? We're going to talk about them in 1 second. But before we do, one of the combos that they can be used in Alter Ego is for her printed action, where you can exhaust one of these and shuffle a psionic card from your discard pile back into your deck. This can be really strong with some combo pieces, with like Cerebro. If you shuffle in like Professor X, who is a psionic card, Cerebro can then go tutor him. We'll talk about a couple more of those combo pieces later, but just know that she also has a lot of psionic cards in her kit already. And you can be shuffling in if you have a high attack. If you're pushing for that end of the villain, you can be shuffling in some of her attack cards. Just know that it's a flexible ability. But that's kind of already starting to talk about some combos and some basic stuff. Let's talk about her hero side first. When we flip her over to her hero side, she has a 1-1-2 stat line, which is kind of sad. And then you see that she only has a 4 hand size. And you're like, how could this ever be a good hero? But that's where these cool Psy upgrades come into play. These are 2 weapons that drive her kit. They are double-sided. On one side, they're the Psy knife. It says that Psylocke gets a +1 thwart, and they can be exhausted to generate a mental resource. So now that 1-1-2 stat line can look like a 3-1-2 if you have 2 knives. If you flip them over, and you can flip these over by an interrupt on her basic power, and the way that timing works is that an interrupt always precedes the action. So if I'm going to thwart and I have one of these upgrades in the katana, I can flip it over and I get that plus thwart before the thwart goes off. And so you can either interrupt your action to flip these, or after you generate that resource, you can then turn them over as a response. When they get flipped over, they are now on the katana side. You can exhaust these for a physical resource generator, so mental on the knife, physical on the katana. They give us a +1 attack as well as piercing. So now she can have a 2-2-2 stat line, she can have a 3-1-2 stat line, she can have a 1-3-2 stat line. Remind you of any other psionic heroes? The last thing that I want to mention about the katana side is that they are restricted while the knives are not. This is not a big issue considering that you're allowed to have 2 restricted cards on the table at the same time. But if you are planning to deck build with more restricted cards, this is something you have to be cognizant of, is that you can't have both the katanas out and a restricted card. There's a couple ways to cheat that. We'll talk about that here in a second. For solo play, I typically like to sit with 1 knife and 1 katana. This gives me that nice flexible 2-2-2 stat line, and it's going to lean into her cards because her cards also play around with these Psy energy upgrades. Her kit kind of feels like it has 2 different segments. The first segment that we're going to be talking about are her events, which play heavily into kind of what form her Psy upgrades are. For example, her attack event is Flurry of Blades. Wow, I had a hard time saying that. It's a 3-cost event that deals 2 damage. And then for each Psy knife you control, you can confuse an enemy. For each Psy katana, deal 2 damage. To evaluate this, we can kind of look at it like Dance of Death, which is the same damage output for the same cost from Black Widow's kit. Now, this is not a perfect comparison because Dance of Death has, a 1-2-3. This could be a 2-2-2 with 2 of the Psy katanas in play. And the formula for efficiency in cards drops off with flexibility. So when we're typically looking at what we want to juice a card for, we want to squeeze all the juice out of a card. Swinging Web Kick kind of shows what that is. 3 for 8. The other way that we can look at this is 4 effective resources for 8 damage, or 1 effective resource for 2 damage, if we simplify that fraction and go all the way back to middle school. This is the optimum output. However, flexibility, because a flurry of blades with 2 katanas is only 6 damage, but it's 3 costs for 2, 2, 2, which if you're focused only on the villain is worse, but if you have 3 minions out, it is significantly better. But you also have the flexibility of having 1 knife out and 1 katana, because then you're 2 for 4 damage, or sorry, 3 for 4 damage, and a confuse. And confuse in solo is very, very powerful. So I like this 4 effective resource cost for 4 damage and a confuse. I think that is really strong, especially in solo, because we are able to protect against that nasty advance card, as well as roll back down and trigger her 6 hand sizes along with all of those mutant alter ego supports. Also important to note about this, as well as the next couple cards we're going to be talking about, these are all psionic traded, which means that these cards can't be discounted with team building exercise because Psylocke is psionic traded, as well as be paid for with the power of the mind card that came in next evolution. We'll talk about a little bit more of that in the basic package when we get to that section of the video, but it is good to kind of be thinking about when you're evaluating cost per her kit. Let's move on to Mental Detection, which is her thwart card. It's very similar to Flurry. It's a 2-cost event. It removes 1 threat, and then for each knife you can remove 2 additional threat, and each katana you actually get to draw a card. This is really great. I've been able to bomb like a big side scheme. It comes in with 5 threat. That could be kind of difficult to manage in a solo game. This is really easy to exhaust both of those psi energy upgrades, play this, bomb it for 5, awesome. Or sometimes there's only 1 threat out there, and some of these bigger hero thwart cards maybe overkill in a lot of situations, especially in solo when you're adding 1 threat. So I have played this where I have 2 katanas out, I remove that 1 threat, and I draw 2 cards. It's a little inefficient, but you're getting to see a lot more of your kit. I'm really not ever too upset to see this one because I have the flexibility of, do I want to draw cards? Do I need to take a lot of threat? It's just, it's a nice flexible card that allows me to see more cards or take care of what I need to do. Her defense event is called Psionic Redirect. This is a 2-cost defense event, and it says whenever you take any amount of damage from an enemy attack, you can prevent 2 of that damage. Then for each katana you control, prevent 2 extra. For each knife, confuse that enemy. Again, going with that split down the middle, 1 knife, 1 katana, I think that is probably where you want to be spending most of the game, because now you're spending 3 effective resources to prevent 4 damage and confuse an enemy. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. You can set it up so that if you're going to be taking a huge hit from like Thanos or something like that, he's coming at you with a 5 attack, you can go to each one of the katanas and prevent 6 damage. It can be flexible, and that's one of the things that Psylocke kind of excels at, is she's able to be flexible at the detriment of probably some of those big numbers that we see in like the swinging web kick, but most of the time, I'm going to take the flexibility over the big numbers. The last event is called Telepathic Suggestion. This is a cool card because it allows you to cancel encounter cards. It says when you, now this is important for multiplayer and solo, it is what it is, but whenever you reveal a card from the encounter deck, you can cancel its when revealed effects. This can be really powerful. We don't get a lot of these abilities in Marvel Champions, and so being able to cancel the advance, being able to cancel Shadows of the Past is a really, really good power to have. Then, for each Psi Katana you control, you can choose an enemy and deal 2 damage, and each Psi Knife you can choose a scheme and remove 1 threat for it. So it's a nice flexible cost, or it's a nice flexible card for that 2 cost. But one thing I will say, and I don't recall who said this, so I apologize, it was on one of my live streams, but I do agree with who was saying this, is that she has a lot of cards that our hero interrupts, our hero responses. And the problem here is that she wants to be an alter ego fairly frequently. And so this is along with the Psionic Redirect, she has a hard time in triggering these because she's spending probably half or more of her time with this card in her hand where she cannot play it. Now there are ways that you can, lean away from the alter ego playstyle. I think that's where she probably excels at, is when she's able to flip frequently and take advantage of everything. But honestly, in all of my plays, I'm not 100% sure how many times I've actually been able to pull these cards off. So it's a cool card, but with a hero who wants to flip so much, it's going to be really hard to pull it off consistently. We're going to move along to Angel. I'm going to lump Angel, who is her signature ally, into the bucket of playing with her Psy energy upgrades. And this is because Angel, when you play him from your hand, you get to ready. So he's a 3-cost card, 1, 2, 3 stat line. And whenever you play him from your hand, you get to ready Psylocke. This means that you can utilize all of those nice stats. So if you have that 3 attack now, you can swing for 3 again. So Angel kind of plays into that. He fits into this bucket better than he fits into the next bucket, which is the second area of her kit, and those are her skill portion. We're going to start this discussion off with a 1-cost support called Training Regimen. It says search your deck for a skill card, then if add it to your hand, then if you're in hero form, you have to discard a card. So first, I really like these new supports that are better in Alter Ego, like Worthington Industries that we saw in Angel. I think it's a cool way to not necessarily lock you out of being able to use the support if you're in hero form, but it comes at a benefit if you are in Alter Ego when you trigger it. So Worthington Industries, you get the card draw. With Psylocke, you don't have to discard a card, so it is effectively a +1 card. And I just really like the formula for this type of card design. She has a couple of skill cards in her kit, which we'll talk about, but there are a ton of skill cards in aspects as well. And similar to Angel, right? When he got printed and we were talking about Angel, there's a lot of aerial cards, and it made me revisit some of the aerial cards that are out there and how Angel can interact with those. There are a ton of skills, and it's a trait that I have just never thought about or wanted or looked at, really. And now I'm doing these queries on Marvel CDB to try and find the best skill cards to use because she can tutor them, and it creates some really interesting deck builds. But let's talk about the skill cards in her kit that we can grab. These are all 1-cost upgrades, and they give her a passive benefit as well as a response. So, for example, Martial Arts Training gives her +1 defense, and then it says that after she defends against an attack, you can ready Psylocke. She has a pretty good always ready build where she can take that use her 3 defense and then ready herself so that she can use her 3 attack or thwart. And if you are running like a perfect defense, she can bump up to 4 defense with the armored vest. So it is a nice little upgrade, but if you're not leaning into the defending strategy, a lot of these cards, I think the last one that we're going to talk about, I think I would always rather play, but a lot of these cards you can just use to grab and spend if you're an Alter Ego. And so just flooding the deck with skills is always a nice way to just have that +1 card because you are only searching your deck. And if there are no cards in your deck, your training regimen whiffs. Let's move on to our next one, which is Psionic Training, another 1-cost upgrade. It allows her to ignore the guard and patrol keywords when it's on the table. This is super nice for specific scenarios, but the response is a nice call on confuse. And so what I mean by that is that it says after Psylocke thwarts, we can discard this card to confuse an enemy. And so if we need that guard, you know that you're going to be going up against like Master Mold, or you're going to be going up against Claw, who has a lot of guard in their kit. You can get this card out and just kind of ignore those guards. You probably need to kill them eventually, but like it is a nice way to get around the patrol and guard keywords. And if you thwart, discard, confuse the enemy. She has a lot of ways to confuse, so this is just a nice one to just have on the table ready to go if you need that emergency confuse. The last skill card is actually my favorite. It's called Weapons Training. She gets Retaliate 1, but the response here is that after she attacks, you can discard this to ready each weapon upgrade she controls. Since your Psy upgrades are resource generators, you get those back online, and if you're running like extra weapons, go team. Like, we're having a good day. So one of my favorite ways to do this is use the Psy energy upgrades to play Flurry of Blades, trigger Scimitar, which we'll talk about here in a second. Then we can use this proc Weapons Training, ready everything, play another Psionic card, hit Scimitar again, and it's just, it's very satisfying. It's a combo-y action that just feels good whenever you are able to trigger it. and pull it off to its full effect. Now that we have an understanding of the cards in her kit, let's look at her cost curve. She has a fairly high cost curve at 2.07 per card. It's actually the 9th most expensive in overall. And combine that with only having a 4 hand size, it would be an issue, but she does start with 2 resource generators on the table, which is incredibly consistent and powerful. Plus, she has card draw with mental detection. She has a lot of confuse that allows her to trigger a safe trip down to alter ego, draw up to that 6 cards, plus all of her alter ego supports, training regimen, and all the mutant stuff that we can throw in to get some more cards. I've really not noticed the high cost being too big of an issue because she's able to pay for pretty much anything she wants to. Moving on to basic cards, because she is psionic and she has 10 psionic cards in her kit, we can lean really heavily into Power of the Mind and Team Building Exercise. The aspects also have a ton of psionic cards, and so while alongside these 2 resource and resource generator cards, I really like Scimitar. This is a restricted card, so you have to be careful. And when I was saying earlier, you have to be careful about the katanas being restricted. You're allowed 2 of those. Scimitar is also restricted, and so we have 3 restricted cards. So I really do like running Side Holster alongside this, which gives you another slot for a restricted card just to maintain the flexibility to flip into her katanas when you're ready to make that final push, as well as protect her against her obligation, which are going to flip your psi energy upgrades into your katanas. And if you don't have that side holster, you have to discard Scimitar, and that's a feel bad situation. So I do like running side holster, but with Power of the Mind, Team Building Exercise, and Scimitar, you're going to be able to get a lot of consistent and cheap damage. I also will just drop in and say here that Professor X is so great in this kit. He is psionic. I usually don't mention Professor X. Professor X is going to be good in 99% of decks, right? I think that may be an exaggeration. Professor X is good. I think he is great in this kit. And this is the little combo that we were talking about earlier, is Cerebro with Professor X. Cerebro says that you can search the top 5 cards, or if you control a psionic character, which Psylocke, you can search your entire deck for a X-Men ally and add it to your hand. Because of her printed action on Betsy's side, she can exhaust a psi energy upgrade, shuffle a psionic card, which could be Cerebro, which could be Karma, which could be Caliban, any of your allies or cards into your deck, and then use Cerebro to immediately add them to your hand. So if you wanted to, you could straight up play Professor X every single turn with this combo, and you would have a good time. Cerebro is an excellent card for any psionic character, but especially here when you always can hit. You always have a hit if you're running psionic allies. Alrighty, well, my mic died during the recording of this video, and that was a very sad thing to run into while editing, so here's take 2. I'm going to start back off talking about telekinesis and telepathy. So these are 2 cards that I wanted to talk about in this video because they came in Psylocke's kit. These are 2 new psionic upgrades that are resource sinks. Both of these cost 1 and allow you to spend 2 mental resources for an effect. So telekinesis, you can deal 3 damage to an enemy, and telepathy, you're allowed to remove 2 threat from the scheme. Couple of things to think about here is that they are basic and they are psionic, so they can be triggered with Power of the Mind or Power in All of Us, and they are also mental resource requirements, so you can use knives to trigger them. That being said, they're a little bit under the cost curve. They're a nice sink, and sometimes Psylocke can have too many resources, and that is a nice outlet for some of them. I like them more than I initially thought I would. I've run them before. I do like telekinesis a little bit more, the one that deals damage. I feel like that's a little bit more versatile, especially for the solo play, to either take out the minions or just start throwing some damage at that villain. But they're not something that I'm always running. I just wanted to kind of bring it up because I wanted to talk about it. It's not something that I'm always looking for to put into Psylocke's deck, which is normally what this section or segment is about. But I wanted to talk about them because they are new and they came in with the kit. They're okay. They're okay. They are better than I thought that they would be. Anyways, let's dive into the aspects. And so we're going to start out with what aspect she is least good in. And I don't want to say worst, because whenever I say worst, I think that there is a negative connotation in saying that, hey, she's not good in this aspect. And I do not think that that is the case. So starting out in 4th place, we have leadership. She isn't bad in leadership. It's just not super flashy. She has a couple of psionic targets like Phantom X and Caliban for the allies that work really well with her. And then also Psychic Kicker is an incredibly good card that's 0 for a ready and another activation. So you can bomb threat, you can bomb damage. Psychic Kicker is nice. What I will say about leadership is that she likes card draw. With 4 hand size in hero form, access to more cards, because she is typically more on the resource side. She has more resources than she does cards. Like a strength in numbers build feels really good here, where you can bring out some of these allies and then exhaust them for cards, and then you can run into some of your better cards. And then you can use Psychic Kickers to ready those allies that have been exhausted. So leadership is in 4th place. It's good. It's good. It's not anything flashy. In 3rd place, we actually have the aspect that she came with, and that's going to be Justice. Justice did get a really nice boost with this pack with a new card that is called Float Like a Butterfly. I really like Float Like a Butterfly. This is a upgrade that whenever a character you control attacks a confused enemy, they increase the amount of damage dealt by 1. So this is really great for her Flurry of Blades, which is 3 instances of 2 damage. So now it's 3 instances of 3 damage. So while we were talking about under the efficiency curve, now we're above the efficiency curve with that. And it's just a really good card because she has so much access to Confuse. You can pretty much always have this active. She also has a new card called Upside the Head, which is very triggerable because she's able to attack, and then that triggers the response window for Upside the Head, being able to play that to confuse, or more likely, since we are playing Psylocke, they are already confused, we can then stun the attacked enemy, probably the villain. Why this is in 3rd place and not higher up is that she already has really good thwarting in her kit. Her mental detection, as well as having a 3 thwart with her knives, feels really good, and she has a lot of confuse already. We're probably running X and then recurring X if we want to. So Justice, which is the aspect that has all the confuse, it has all the threat mitigation, it's a lot. We're already really proficient at that. And so these other 2 aspects that are coming after this just round out and just accelerate that victory a little bit more. That being said, I think Justice is going to be a really, really good multiplayer aspect for Psylocke. In 2nd place, we have Protection. Any hero that has a 3 in one of their offensive stats is going to have a good time with Protection when they can get ready multiple times. And Protection allows us to do that. I also I thought Protection was good. And then Villain Theory pointed out that Repurpose is a skill. And so we can trigger Training Regiment and pull Repurpose so that we can play that. And that changed my mind. Her Repurpose build is incredibly powerful because she can tutor that Repurpose. If you draw into a Repurpose, I like to go ahead and use Training Regiment to get a second one. A 2x Repurpose turn in solo can be very lethal with how much damage she can push so very quickly. The other thing about Protection is that with 10 hit points and 3 recovery, she's on the squishier side of our heroes. And so Protection with energy barriers, leaning into the Repurpose with like force field generators, these cards that protect health, and then we can turn those into damage output with a Repurpose. Feels really good because we don't then have to worry too much about that squishiness with her. That means that in 1st place, which is also my favorite way to play her, is Aggression. Hone Technique is a skill, and she has mental resource generators. Do I have to say anything else? One of the things about Hone Technique is that if you don't get it out early enough, is it going to pay off? And if you have Hone Technique, you can draw into Hone Technique, or you can tutor it using her kit, and then she's going to be able to hit the mental resource requirements. The knives hit the Hone Technique resource requirement, and then for every single subsequent aggression event, if you are splitting those down the middle, if you have a knife that can pay for that aggression event, you will get that Hone Technique kicker where you get to add the cost into the damage output of the card. She also has Psychic Kicker, or Psychic Assault, I'm sorry, and then Cybo Attack, which are nice supplements into like a 2-cost, Hone Technique attack. Inside her kit, like what we were talking about with Justice, she can really handle the thwart with her basic activations. So we can sit there and use our activation for threat and aggression, home technique stuff for damage. And that is a really nice, well-rounded package. Or if you want to, you can go crazy, add a combat training in there, which is a skill. You can tutor that. And just get a basic attack of 4 with your 2 knives. Angel readies her. You just go crazy and you get to attack for 4 a lot. Her aggression build is nice and varied as well as pretty powerful. The community, we agreed that aggression was the best, but we kind of differed with the rest. They had Justice in second place and leadership protection basically tied at the bottom, whereas I had protection in second. That being said, I think aggression is a clear winner here, but the bottom 3 are interchangeable based on matchup, based on whatever. Overall, they had her ranked at an A tier with a healthy skew to both the S and the B tier. So like it was kind of even there. I'm going to agree with them and drop her in at the A tier between Storm and Ant-Man. Psylocke is really powerful. Confuse in solo is great. Being able to confuse the villain to protect against that unneeded advance, or the unwanted advance, they're never needed, right? The unwanted advance, or the safety net of flipping down the alter ego to trigger all of her alter ego support, as well as the mutant stuff, is incredible. Having the on-call psionic allies, the Professor X, Karma, Caliban, any of those psionic allies, with her action in her alter ego set, and Cerebro is incredible. You can play Professor X every single turn if you want to. The skills with Training Regiment are a cool way to build around and modify the deck building for her a little bit. As our card pool grows, as we get more and more skill cards available to us, her potential and the way that she can be built changes because she has the ability to continuously tutor those. And so I'm excited to see some more, and I'm curious if anyone's found a fun skill combo that utilizes Training Regiment. I do want to point out that Stalwart and Steady are getting much more prevalent, which means we're going to struggle with some of those matchups. Stalwart meaning that they cannot be stunned or confused. Steady means that it takes 2 of those status cards to fully stun or confuse. Because Psylocke revolves so much around the confuse mechanism, she's going to be hindered by these keywords. I still think that she can thrive. With steady villains like a Flurry of Blades can fully confuse a steady villain, which is really good and really powerful, but against the stalwart villains, she loses that part of her kit, which is her strongest part of the kit. Now, she can still shift away from the confused part. She can, if we go back to like Flurry of Blades, she can have her 2 katanas out and deal 6 damage and never touch that confused with having the knife out. So she has the flexibility to shift away from that, and she's not completely shut down by the stalwart villains, but she is going to struggle more. It feels like I'm playing kind of a weaker tier hero against stalwart villains. I think that she's a really fun puzzly hero that will continue to get better, and I just have a lot of fun with all of the timings and interrupts and trying to figure out and make sure that I can have 3 attack or 2 attack with piercing, and how I can get everything that's on the table to combo off. When we're talking about multiplayer, I do think she drops off a little bit because of how good Confuse is for solo. I still think that she's good, and Confuse is still good in multiplayer. It's just significantly better in solo. But one of the things that I was thinking about with Psylocke is you can kind of lean into like a support build where you bring out all the skills for everybody, like combat training, heroic intuition, skilled investigator, all of these cards that boost stats and can have like impact for other heroes that you can play on other heroes. You can tutor those. So you can sit in alter ego, grab all these skills and just start passing them out. I think that would be kind of fun. You run her in Justice, and I was saying that I think Justice is probably her best multiplayer aspect because of how much more threat there is for a multiplayer game. We can run her in Justice to help supplement that. We can run her at the 4 thwart if she has the 2 knives and a heroic intuition. But also Float Like a Butterfly is a really good card. You can play Float under any character's control. So if you have 3 characters, you can bring 3 floats, pass them out, and then she has so much confuse in her kit that she can pretty much make sure there's always going to be a target for that float extra damage for herself and her teammates. Seems kind of fun. I'm actually, right after this, I'm going to play a game, a 2-handed game for that. So I think that game will actually be out before this video, or maybe around the same time. Who knows? Anyways, thank you so very much for hanging out. I appreciate you all. I want to know what you think. What do you think about Psylocke? Are you a fan of having a smaller hand size and resource generators on the table? And I'm also curious to see if there's any deck builds that you have found really interesting and fun for her. If you want, throw those in the description. I would love to take a look at them. I like learning from all the decks, and y'all have so much creativity. It's so much fun to see what y'all come up with. So thank you all for hanging out. I appreciate y'all, and I will see you next time. Peace.